My name is Nora Ellison. I'm 32 years old. For 30 years, my parents had a name for me. Not sweetheart, not darling, not even just Nora. They called me their backup plan, and they said it the way other families say, pass the salt, casually, constantly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My brother Blake was the investment, the future, the one they poured every dollar, every dream, every ounce of pride into. I was the safety net. The one who'd be there if things went wrong, the one they kept on a shelf in case they ever needed her. 3 weeks ago, my parents walked into the most exclusive senior living community in Massachusetts. Marble lobbies, private suites overlooking the harbor, a 2-year waiting list, and a price tag that made my father's pension look like pocket change. They'd been referred by their financial advisor. They were given the VIP tour. They shook hands with the concierge, admired the gardens, tasted the chef's tasting menu in the resident dining room. They loved it. They wanted in. Then the concierge handed them the welcome portfolio. Leather-bound, embossed in gold. My mother opened it to the first page. The founder's letter. And she saw the photograph. My father had to sit down. My mother dropped her coffee on the marble floor. And for the first time in 30 years, my parents realized their backup plan had built something they couldn't afford to live without. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story genuinely resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who's out there right now. Now let me take you back to a kitchen in Brookline, Massachusetts, and the first time I understood exactly what I was to my family. I was 7 years old the first time I heard it. We were sitting at the dinner table. Mom had made pot roast. The good china was out, which meant something important was happening. Blake was 10 across from me, fidgeting in his chair with that restless energy he always had, the kind my parents mistook for brilliance. Dad set down his fork and cleared his throat, the way he did when he had what he called a family announcement. Frank Ellison loved family announcements. They made him feel like a CEO instead of a mid-level accountant at a firm he'd never make partner at. "Blake," Dad said, "your mother and I have been talking. We've decided to enroll you in the Weston Academy starting next fall." Weston Academy. Even at 7, I knew what that meant. It was the private school 2 towns over, the one with the brick buildings and the crest on the blazer, the one that cost more per year than our mortgage. Blake grinned. "Cool." "It's a significant investment," Dad continued, looking at Mom like they'd rehearsed this. "But we believe in you, son. This is the first step. Weston to prep school to an Ivy. That's the plan." Mom beamed. "Our investment in the future." I pushed a piece of carrot around my plate. "Can I go too?" The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds, but I remember it like it lasted an hour. Dad glanced at Mom. Mom glanced at Dad. Then Dad smiled. Not unkindly, not cruelly, just factually, and said 5 words that would define the next 25 years of my life. "You're our backup plan, Nora." He said it like it was a compliment, like he was giving me a role in a play I should be grateful to audition for. "Every family needs one," Mom added. "Blake's going to do big things, but if anything ever goes sideways, we know we can count on you. You're reliable, sweetheart. That's your gift. Reliable. Not talented, not bright, not worth investing in. Reliable. Like a Honda Civic, like a backup generator in the basement. Something you're glad to have but never think about until the power goes out." Blake didn't even look up. He was already thinking about his new school, his new uniform, his new life as the Ellison family's golden investment. I went to Brookline Public School. I wore hand-me-downs from my cousin Teresa. And I learned at 7 years old that some children are chosen and some children are kept. The pattern calcified over the next decade. Not dramatically. That's the thing people don't understand about this kind of damage. It wasn't one catastrophic event. It was 1,000 small cuts delivered with smiles. Blake needed a tutor for algebra. They hired one at $85 an hour 3 times a week. When I struggled with geometry a year later, Mom handed me a textbook. "You're a hard worker, Nora. You'll figure it out. I did figure it out. I taught myself, got a B+. Nobody mentioned it. Blake wanted to play lacrosse. They bought him equipment that cost $600, drove him to practices 40 minutes each way, attended every game. When I asked about joining the school's science Olympiad, entry fee $35, Dad frowned. We're stretched thin right now with Blake's season, sweetheart. Maybe next year. There was no next year. There was never a next year, 8th grade, the one that still stings. I'd been working on a project for the State History Fair for 3 months, a scale model of the Lowell textile mills with working water wheels I'd built from popsicle sticks and a motor I'd salvaged from an old CD player. My teacher, Mrs. Delgado, said it was the most ambitious project she'd seen in 20 years. The fair was on a Saturday in March, same day as Blake's regional lacrosse semifinal. You already know where my parents went. Mrs. Delgado drove me to the fair. I won first place. Blue ribbon, trophy, handshake from the state superintendent. When I got home, buzzing with pride, holding the trophy like it was made of gold, Mom was on the phone recapping Blake's game to Aunt Teresa. He scored twice, Teresa, twice. The coach said he's never seen a freshman with that kind of field vision. I set the trophy on the kitchen counter. Mom glanced at it while she talked, gave me a thumbs up, mouthed the words, "That's nice, honey." The trophy sat on that counter for 3 days. Then Mom moved it to make room for a fruit bowl. I found it in the junk drawer 6 months later, under a stack of takeout menus. Blake's lacrosse trophies had their own shelf in the living room. Here's a small detail that will matter later. My grandmother, Margaret Ellison, Dad's mother, Grandma Maggie to me, came for dinner the Sunday after the history fair. She was 71 then, still sharp as a scalpel. The kind of woman who noticed everything and said exactly what she thought about half of it. She saw the trophy in the junk drawer. I know because she asked me about it, quietly, while we washed dishes together. First place? She held it up. Read the engraving. State History Fair, Nora Ellison, first place. She looked at me. Where was this displayed? On the counter for a while. Mom needed the space. Maggie's jaw tightened. She dried her hands on the towel and set the trophy on the windowsill above the sink, facing outward so anyone walking into the kitchen would see it. Keep it there, she said. Not a suggestion. Then she said something I didn't understand until years later. Your father was never the smart one in this family, Nora. He was just the loud one. The smart ones are always quiet. They're too busy building to make noise. She went back to drying dishes. I went back to being invisible. But Maggie was watching. She was always watching. High school was 4 years of Blake's ascension and my erasure. Blake went to Weston, then to Phillips Exeter for prep school, then to Cornell, not quite Ivy enough for Dad's original dream, but close enough to brag about at dinner parties. My parents spent approximately $340,000 on Blake's education between ages 10 and 22. I know the number because I found the spreadsheet later on Dad's computer, labeled Blake's Investment Portfolio, Education. I had no spreadsheet. I had no portfolio. I had public school, a used laptop Mom got at a church rummage sale, and the Brookline Public Library, where I spent so many hours the librarian started saving me a desk by the window. But here's the thing about being the backup plan. Nobody watches you. Nobody monitors your progress. Nobody cares what you're doing because they've already decided it doesn't matter, which means nobody stops you either. I graduated 3rd in my class. I got a full scholarship to UMass Amherst. When I told my parents at dinner, Dad nodded and said, "Good, that saves us money for Blake's business school applications." My full scholarship, the result of 4 years of grinding in a public school with no tutor, no prep courses, no $400 an hour SAT coach, was valuable to my father only because it freed up cash for Blake. Mom added, "We're so proud of both of you." But she was looking at Blake when she said it. I packed for college alone, loaded my car alone, drove to Amherst alone. Nobody helped me move in. So Blake had move-in day photos with both parents, a professionally organized dorm room, and a $2,000 fresh start check from Dad. I had a suitcase, a second-hand mini fridge, and $312 in my checking account. but I also had something Blake never did. I had clarity. I knew exactly what I was worth to my family. Nothing, until they needed something. And I knew, with the quiet certainty of someone who's been building in silence for years, that I was going to prove them wrong. Not for them. For me. UMass Amherst wasn't glamorous. No brick towers, no family legacy, no name that made people's eyebrows go up at cocktail parties. But it had a business school, a healthcare administration program, and professors who didn't care what prep school you didn't attend. I double majored, business administration and healthcare management. I worked 2 jobs, barista at the campus coffee shop from 5 to 9 a.m. and data entry at a local insurance office from 6 to 10 p.m. Somewhere between the espresso machine and the spreadsheets, I studied. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving freshman year, told Mom I had to work. The truth was, I couldn't afford the gas, and I knew no one would notice the empty chair. I was right. Mom's Thanksgiving Instagram post that year. Grateful for this beautiful family. 3 people at the table. Frank, Judith, Blake, no mention of a 4th. Grandma Maggie called me that night, 9 p.m. Her voice raspy, warm. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. Happy Thanksgiving, Maggie. You're not home. I'm working. A pause, the kind of pause that means someone is choosing their words with surgical precision. Neither am I. Your father told me dinner was family only this year. Apparently 80-year-old mothers don't qualify. My chest tightened. Maggie, it's fine. I made myself a turkey sandwich and watched Jeopardy. I got Final Jeopardy right and your father wouldn't have. That's enough victory for one day. I laughed. She laughed. 2 Ellison women spending Thanksgiving alone, connected by a phone line and the shared understanding that we were both afterthoughts. Nora. Her voice changed, softer, deliberate. I want you to listen to me. You are not a backup plan. You are not a safety net. You are not reliable. She said the word like it was an insult. You are exceptional, and one day they're going to see it. But by then, you'll have built something so far beyond them that their opinion won't matter anymore. You sound so sure. I am sure. I was the backup plan in my family too. My brother Gerald got the business, the house, the inheritance. I got a pat on the head and a set of dishes. You know what I did? What? I started my own company, small, real estate, 3 rental properties in Quincy, grew it to 11 before I sold it and retired. Gerald's business went bankrupt in 1987. He came to me for a loan. I gave it to him. She paused. With interest. I was quiet for a long time. Build something, Nora. Build it quietly. And when they come looking for you, and they will, make sure you're standing behind a desk with your name on it. She sent me a check the next week. $5,000. The memo line read, Seed money. Don't tell your father. I put it in a savings account and didn't touch it for 4 years, but I thought about it every single day. Meanwhile, Blake was living the life my parents had architected for him. Cornell undergrad, then an MBA at Wharton, another $180,000 that Dad proudly called an investment in our family's future. Blake graduated Wharton with honors, got recruited by a venture capital firm in Manhattan. Salary, $185,000 plus bonuses. Dad told everyone at the neighborhood block party, told the mailman, told the barber. I'm pretty sure he told the cat. Blake's going to be running that firm in 5 years, Dad said at Christmas, clinking his wine glass. Mark my words, this family is going places. I was home for Christmas that year. I'd driven 4 hours through a snowstorm because Mom had called and said, We need you here to help with the dinner, Nora. I can't do it all myself with my back. I cooked the entire meal, set the table, cleaned up afterward while Blake and Dad watched football and Mom napped on the couch. At one point, Blake wandered into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter. Thanks for handling all this, he said. You're really good at it. At what? You know, the domestic stuff, the organizing. It's like your thing. My thing. Like my PhD-level talent was wiping down countertops. What's your thing, Blake? I asked, rinsing a pot. Making money. He grinned, took a swig, walked away. I stood at that sink and thought about Grandma Maggie's words. Build something. Build it quietly. The next morning I drove back to Amherst. I changed my elective track to focus on senior living facility management. I started researching the assisted living industry with the intensity of someone who'd just been given a mission. I didn't know exactly what I was building yet, but I knew it would involve giving people a place where they were seen, valued, and treated like they mattered, because I knew what it felt like when they didn't. If you've ever been the one doing all the work while someone else got all the credit, if you've ever been called reliable, like it was a consolation prize, drop a fire emoji in the comments. And if you think my parents are going to regret calling me their backup plan, type karma. Let's keep going, because what happened next changed everything. Grandma Maggie had a stroke on a Tuesday in April. I was 23, 2 months from finishing my master's degree. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Ellison? This is Brockton General. Your grandmother, Margaret Ellison, has been admitted. She listed you as her emergency contact. Not Dad. Not Blake. Me. I drove 90 minutes to Brockton. When I arrived, the hospital was exactly what you'd expect from an underfunded regional facility. Fluorescent lights, peeling paint, overworked nurses moving too fast through hallways that smelled like disinfectant and something worse beneath it. Maggie was in a shared room, 2 beds separated by a thin curtain. The woman on the other side had a television blaring a game show at full volume. Maggie's bed was by the window, but the blinds were broken, stuck at an angle that let in a stripe of harsh light across her face. She was awake. Right side partially paralyzed, speech slightly slurred, but her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, were fully online. Nora. She reached for me with her left hand. I took it. You came. Of course I came. She squeezed my fingers. Don't let them put me in one of those places. What places? Those facilities, the ones that smell like resignation, where they park old people in hallways and pretend it's care. Her voice cracked. I built things my whole life, Nora. I won't spend my last years in a room that makes me feel like I'm already gone. I looked around at the cracked ceiling tiles, the stained curtain, the call button that had been taped to the bed rail because the cord was broken. This was what the system offered. This was what care looked like for people who'd spent their lives building, working, giving. I won't let that happen, I said. She looked at me. Really looked. The way she had when I was 13, holding that trophy. I know you won't, she whispered. That's why I chose you. I didn't understand what she meant until the lawyer called. 3 weeks later, Maggie was stable enough to move to a rehabilitation center. A slightly better one. I'd spent hours researching options, calling administrators, reading inspection reports. The best I could find within her insurance coverage still had a 6-month-old health code violation and a 2.3-star Google rating. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way, and I was furious. Dad visited Maggie once, brought flowers, stayed 20 minutes, left because he had a thing. Blake sent a card, Hallmark, pre-printed message, didn't even sign it personally. I recognized Mom's handwriting. I visited every single day for 2 months. I brought her books, played her old records on a portable speaker, smuggled in her favorite lemon cookies from the Italian bakery on Hanover Street. I learned to adjust her pillows just right. I memorized her medication schedule because the staff kept mixing up the dosages. On a Thursday evening, 6 weeks into her rehab stay, Maggie called me to her bedside. The room was quiet. The other bed was empty. The previous occupant had been discharged. "Close the door," she said. I did. "Sit down." I sat. She reached under her pillow and pulled out an envelope. Thick, sealed. "I had my lawyer draw this up last year," she said. "Before the stroke, before any of this. I knew this day was coming." I took the envelope. "Maggie, what is this?" When I sold my real estate properties in 2006, I didn't spend the money. I invested it. Quietly. The way Ellison women do. She paused, caught her breath. The stroke had taken some of her stamina, but none of her intention. The account has been growing for 17 years. As of last month, it holds $740,000. I stared at her. "It's yours, Nora." Maggie, I can't. You can and you will. Her voice was iron wrapped in flannel. Your father got his inheritance when my husband died. He spent it on Blake's education. Every penny. He never offered you a dime, and he never thanked me for the money that built his son's golden resume. Her grip tightened on my hand. This money was never part of your father's inheritance. It's mine, earned, invested, and allocated by Margaret Rose Ellison. And I'm giving it to the only person in this family who ever treated me like I was more than furniture. Tears were rolling down my face now. I couldn't stop them. Don't cry, she said, and she was almost smiling. Take this money and build something that makes people feel seen, something that makes old women like me feel like they still matter. She touched my cheek with her good hand. And when your father calls you the backup plan again, and he will, you look him in the eye, and you know exactly who you are. I opened the envelope that night in my apartment. Inside, account statements, transfer authorizations, a notarized letter from Maggie's lawyer, and a handwritten note on cream stationery. Nora, you were never the backup plan. You were always the foundation. Build on it. All my love. Maggie. I held that note against my chest and cried until there was nothing left. Then I opened my laptop and started writing a business plan. Grandma Maggie passed away 11 months later, peacefully, in her sleep, in the rehabilitation center that smelled like disinfectant and resignation, exactly the kind of place she'd begged me not to let her end up in. I was the only one in the room. Dad arrived 2 hours later, looked at the body, looked at the machines, looked at me sitting in the plastic chair with red eyes and Maggie's hand still in mine. Well, he said, she had a good run. Then he asked about the will. I said I didn't know. He called the lawyer from the parking lot. The lawyer told him what Maggie had left Frank Ellison, her china set and a framed photograph of his father. Dad was quiet for 3 days. He never asked what she left me. He assumed it was nothing. After all, I was just the backup plan. I let him believe that. And I took $740,000, a handwritten note, and a promise I'd made to a dying woman, and I started building. I need to tell you about Helen Chambers, because without Helen, the money would have stayed in an account, the business plan would have stayed on a laptop, and I would have stayed invisible. I met Helen 6 weeks after Maggie's funeral at a healthcare administration conference in Providence. I was 24, had just finished my master's degree, and was attending on a student pass I'd gotten by volunteering to help with registration. Helen was the keynote speaker. 62 years old, silver-haired, 5'2", and radiating the kind of authority that makes tall men in expensive suits sit up straighter. She'd spent 30 years in senior living, built a chain of assisted living facilities across New England, sold it at 55 and now consulted for hospitals and investors. Her speech was about dignity in elder care. She said something that stopped me cold. We have designed a system that warehouses human beings during the most vulnerable chapter of their lives. We take people who built companies, raised families, fought wars, and we put them in rooms with broken blinds and televisions bolted to the wall, and we call it care. It's not care, it's storage, and it's a national disgrace. I thought about Maggie, the broken call button, the stained curtain, the 2.3-star Google rating. After the speech, there was a networking reception. I didn't belong there. Everyone else was in suits, had business cards, had titles. I was in a blazer I'd bought at Goodwill and had nothing to hand anyone. But I waited, lingered near the refreshment table until the crowd thinned. Then I walked up to Helen Chambers and said something that, looking back, was either very brave or very stupid. Ms. Chambers, I have $740,000, a master's degree, and a dead grandmother who deserved better than what this industry gave her. I want to build something different. Will you help me? Helen looked at me for a long moment. Then she laughed, not dismissively, appreciatively, like someone had just said exactly the thing she'd been waiting to hear. How old are you? 24. And you have $740,000? From my grandmother. She built it herself. Smart woman. The smartest person I've ever known. Helen reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, cream-colored, embossed. Come to my office on Monday, bring your business plan, and don't waste my time." "I won't." "Good," she smiled, "because I've been looking for someone like you for about 15 years. Helen became my Maggie. Different in style, where Maggie was warm and quiet, Helen was sharp and blunt, but identical in substance. She saw me, she believed in me, and she didn't let me play small. Over the next 2 years, Helen and I developed the concept for what would become Haven Senior Living. Not a nursing home, not an assisted living facility, a community, a place designed around the radical idea that people over 70 still have dignity, still have desires, still have lives worth living. We spent months on the model. Helen taught me the business side, zoning laws, licensing requirements, Medicare reimbursement structures, saw capital stack planning. I brought the vision, the design philosophy, the care model, the commitment to making every resident feel like a person, not a patient. "Most people in this industry think about beds," Helen said one evening over takeout in her office. "Beds and billing, that's it. You think about people, that's your edge." Maggie's $740,000 became the seed investment. Helen introduced me to 2 angel investors she'd worked with, retired healthcare executives who believed in the concept and committed another $1.2 million. I found the property in Marblehead, a defunct waterfront hotel with harbor views, solid bones, and a price tag that was 50% below market because the previous owner had let it deteriorate. I negotiated the purchase, oversaw the renovation, went and designed every detail, from the width of the hallways to the height of the grab bars, to the color of the walls in the common rooms. Warm colors, natural light, fresh flowers in every hallway, a chef who made real food, not institutional mush, a library with actual books, a garden where residents could grow tomatoes and argue about politics. I named it Haven, because that's what it was supposed to be, a safe harbor for people who deserve to be seen during the chapter of their lives when the world stops looking. Haven opened in the spring when I was 27. 12 suites, full within 6 weeks. Waiting list by month 3. By 29, I'd opened a second location. By 30, a third. By 31, Haven Senior Living had 4 communities across eastern Massachusetts, 340 residents, a staff of 200, and a reputation that made every other facility in the region look like a parking garage. Boston Magazine did a profile. "The Woman Reinventing How We Age." Healthcare journals published case studies on our care model. The governor's office invited me to join a task force on senior living reform, and I did all of this under my married name. I should tell you about Daniel, not because the story is about him, but because he matters to who I became. I met Daniel Reeves at a zoning board meeting. He was a civil engineer reviewing construction permits. Quiet, methodical, the kind of man who reads every line of every document and asks questions that make everyone else realize they should have been paying attention. He was also kind, genuinely, structurally kind, the way some buildings are structurally sound, not performative, not transactional, just built that way. Our first date was at a diner near the Marblehead property. I was covered in drywall dust. He'd come straight from a construction site. We talked about load-bearing walls for 40 minutes, and I realized that was the most interesting conversation I'd had in months. 6 months later, we were living together. A year after that, engaged. We got married in Helen's garden. 30 guests, small, intentional, the people who'd actually shown up for my life. I invited my parents. I don't know why. Some habits are harder to break than others. They came. Dad wore a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. Mom brought a card with a check for $200, the same amount they'd given me for high school graduation, for college graduation, and for getting my master's degree. Exactly $200 every time. Oh, like I was a recurring expense on a spreadsheet. Blake didn't come. He was traveling for work. Mom delivered this excuse like it was a diplomatic communique. Blake sends his love. He's in Singapore. Very important deal. At the reception, Dad pulled me aside. Brief, perfunctory, the way he handled all personal moments, like they were items on a to-do list. "Nice wedding, Nora. Glad you found someone." "Thanks, Dad." Daniel seems solid, Reliable. That word again. Reliable. The highest compliment he could muster for either of us. Listen, he continued. Your mother and I are thinking about the future. Retirement, you know. We're not getting any younger. Okay. Blake's going to help us with the financial side, obviously. He's got the head for that, but we might need you for the practical stuff. The day-to-day. The day-to-day? You know, if we need help around the house, doctor's appointments, that kind of thing. He patted my shoulder. You're good at that. You've always been our backup plan. My wedding day. My father found me at my own wedding reception to remind me that my primary value was as a safety net for his old age. Daniel found me in the garden 10 minutes later, sitting on a bench, staring at the trees. You okay? My dad just told me I'm the backup plan again. At my own wedding. Daniel sat beside me. He didn't try to fix it. Didn't minimize it. Just sat with me in the damage. You know what I think? He finally said. What? I think your dad has no idea who he's talking to. And I think one day that's going to be the most expensive mistake he's ever made. I leaned into him. He put his arm around me. I married you because you're nobody's backup, Nora. You're my first choice every single day. I held on to that, filed it in the same drawer where I kept Maggie's note and Sarah Delgado's blue ribbon. The drawer of people who saw me. 3.5 years passed. Haven grew, I grew. And here's the critical detail. My parents had no idea. Haven operated under my company name, Reeves Senior Living, LLC, named after Daniel. My married name wasn't Ellison anymore. It was Reeves. And I had never once told my parents what I did for a living. This wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. When Mom asked what I did at family gatherings, the rare ones I attended, I kept it vague. Healthcare consulting, I'd say. Administrative work. She'd nod, lose interest immediately, and pivot to Blake. Blake just closed a $40 million fund. Can you imagine? $40 million. I could imagine. I was managing 4 properties, 340 residents, and an annual revenue stream that made Blake's fund look quaint. But I said nothing. I smiled. I passed the potatoes. I played the backup plan. Why? Because Grandma Maggie taught me something about power. Real power isn't loud. Real power is knowing what you have and choosing when to reveal it. Real power is building an empire while everyone assumes you're making coffee. I was waiting. Not for revenge. I need you to understand that. I wasn't waiting for a chance to hurt them. I was waiting for the moment the truth would matter. When it would land not as a weapon, but as a fact. When the sheer, undeniable reality of what I'd built would do the talking that words never could. I didn't know when that moment would come, but Maggie had taught me patience too. Ellison women build quietly. We play the long game, and the long game was about to reach its final move. I want to pause here. If you've ever built something incredible while the people who should have supported you had no idea, if you've ever kept your success a secret because the people closest to you never asked, type "silent builder" in the comments. And if you think my parents are about to have the worst afternoon of their lives, stay right there because we're getting to the part I've been waiting to tell you. Here's what you need to know about what happened to Blake. The golden child. The investment. The one my parents spent $340,000 preparing for greatness. Blake's venture capital career lasted exactly 6 years. By 32, he'd made partner at his firm. Dad threw a party, literally, catered, 40 guests. A banner in the living room that read, "Congratulations, Blake, partner," in gold letters. I was there. I brought a bottle of wine. Nobody opened it. But here's what Dad didn't put on the banner. Blake's firm was leveraged to the ceiling. Aggressive bets on crypto startups, biotech SPACs, speculative real estate. The kind of portfolio that looks brilliant on the way up and criminal on the way down. The market correction hit in 2023. Blake's fund lost 60% of its value in 4 months. 3 of his portfolio companies declared bankruptcy. The firm's managing partners launched an internal audit. Blake resigned before they could fire him, a distinction that mattered to exactly no one except my father, who told everyone at the next block party that Blake had decided to explore new opportunities. Blake burned through his savings in 18 months. Lifestyle didn't adjust. The Manhattan apartment stayed, the car stayed, the restaurant habit stayed. His wife, Lauren, filed for divorce 8 months later. She kept the apartment. He got a studio in Jersey City and a bar tab he couldn't close. My parents refused to see it. Denial is a powerful medication, and Frank and Judith Ellison were taking it by the fistful. Blake's regrouping, Mom told Aunt Teresa. He's brilliant. He just needs time. Smart guys bounce back, Dad told the neighbors. This is temporary. It wasn't temporary. It was a reckoning. 20 years of being told you're exceptional without ever learning to be resilient creates a particular kind of fragility. Blake didn't know how to fail because he'd never been allowed to. Every setback had been cushioned. Every mediocre result had been reframed as brilliance. And now, with the cushions gone, Blake did what the golden child always does when the gold peels off. He called the backup plan. Not me. Not directly. He was too proud for that. He called Mom, who called me. Nora, your brother needs help. What kind of help? Financial. Just temporary. Just until he gets back on his feet. How much? He owes some... Well, it doesn't matter. Can you lend him something? $20,000 would make a real difference. $20,000. The amount my parents had never once spent on me, they were now asking me to hand to Blake. Mom, I'm not in a position to do that. But you and Daniel both work, surely. We have our own expenses. She sighed. The sigh I'd been hearing my entire life. The one that meant I was being difficult, inconvenient, not performing my role as the reliable one. You know, Nora, family is supposed to help each other. I agree. I've been waiting for that to start. The line went quiet. Then she hung up. Blake never called me himself. Never mentioned it at Christmas. We sat at opposite ends of the table and performed the ritual of family dinner while the elephant in the room wore a "I lost $40 million" sign around its neck. Meanwhile, Dad was turning 63 and the retirement math wasn't working. Here's the thing about Frank Ellison's financial plan. It had one pillar: Blake. The entire retirement strategy was built on the assumption that Blake would be wildly successful and would supplement their retirement income with generosity earned from his Wall Street fortune. There was no plan B. There was no diversified portfolio. There was no long-term care insurance. There was just Blake, the investment that was supposed to pay dividends forever. When the investment collapsed, the plan collapsed with it. Dad's pension from the accounting firm was modest, $38,000 a year. Mom had never worked. Their savings, eroded by years of funding Blake's education and lifestyle, sat at roughly $180,000. The house was paid off but needed a new roof, a new furnace, and electrical work that 3 different contractors had quoted at over $40,000. They were 63 and 61, healthy enough now, but staring down 2 decades of aging with an infrastructure built for a future that no longer existed. It was Aunt Teresa, Mom's sister, who first mentioned Haven. I know this because Teresa called me afterward, excited. Nora, have you heard of this place? Haven Senior Living? It's supposed to be extraordinary, like a 5-star hotel for retirees. Beautiful grounds, gourmet food, activities, the whole thing. Teresa's friend Margaret, different Margaret, had moved into the Marblehead location 2 months ago and couldn't stop raving about it. Your mother is interested, Teresa continued. They're not ready yet, of course, but she asked me to look into it. Apparently there's a new location in Hingham that has a few openings. Hingham, our newest community, the one I'd personally designed, the one with the harbor views, the rooftop garden, the art studio, and the hydrotherapy pool. That's interesting, I said. My voice didn't change. What did Mom say? She wants to tour it. Your father's being stubborn, says they don't need a home, but Patricia's wearing him down. You know how she is? I knew exactly how she was. Teresa, do me a favor. Don't mention my name in connection with Haven, okay? A pause. Why would I? You do healthcare consulting. Right, just let them tour it on their own, no strings. Of course, honey. I hung up and sat in my office on the fourth floor of Haven's Hingham location. Through the window, I could see the harbor. Sailboats. The late afternoon light doing that golden thing it does in Massachusetts in autumn. I picked up the phone and called my operations director, Marcus. Marcus, we have a VIP tour request coming in. And last name Ellison. Frank and Judith. Ellison? Any relation? My parents. Oh. A pause. Marcus had heard enough of my story over the years to understand the weight of that word. How do you want to handle it? Standard VIP tour. The full experience. Don't mention me. Don't mention my involvement. Let them see the building, the rooms, the amenities. Answer all their questions. Give them the welcome portfolio at the end. The one with your founder's letter? Yes. Nora. His voice was careful. Your photo is on the first page. I knew. I'd designed that portfolio myself. My photo, my letter, my name, Nora Reeves, founder and CEO, printed on heavyweight stock in a leather-bound cover. I know, I said. That's the point. I set the phone down, looked at the harbor, and waited. The tour was scheduled for a Thursday at 2 p.m. And I wasn't there, not in person, but I watched the security feed from my office at the Marblehead location 20 minutes away. Not because I wanted to spy, because I needed to see their faces. I needed to see the moment. Marcus greeted them in the lobby. I could see my parents on the screen. Dad in his blue blazer, the one he wore to anything he considered important. Mom in a floral dress holding her purse with both hands the way she did when she was nervous. The lobby was designed to take people's breath away. I knew because I'd overseen every detail. Italian marble floors, a double-height ceiling with skylights, fresh flowers on the reception desk, a grand piano in the corner where our resident pianist, Arthur, played Gershwin every afternoon at 3. Mom's head tilted back as she looked up at the ceiling. Dad straightened his blazer. They were trying not to look impressed. They failed. Marcus walked them through the common areas. The library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather chairs, the dining room where Chef Amara prepared 3 meals a day with seasonal ingredients from our partnership with local farms, the art studio, the fitness center with its heated therapy pool, the garden where residents grew vegetables and the roses were maintained by a full-time horticulturist. Mom touched the countertop in the model suite, ran her fingers along the granite. "This is nicer than our kitchen," she said. I could read her lips on the camera. The model suite was 1,200 square feet, full kitchen, walk-in closet, private balcony with a harbor view, emergency pull cords in every room, but designed to be invisible, built into the trim work so they didn't look institutional. Because dignity is in the details. Maggie taught me that. Dad asked about cost. I watched his face as Marcus handed him the pricing sheet. His eyebrows went up, his mouth tightened. He folded the paper and put it in his breast pocket without showing Mom. The tour ended in the welcome lounge. Marcus offered them sparkling water. We had a San Pellegrino dispenser, another detail I'd insisted on, and handed them the welcome portfolio. This was the moment. Mom took the leather-bound folder, gold embossing on the cover. Haven Senior Living, where every chapter matters. She opened it to the first page. The founder's letter, my photograph, my name. I watched my mother's face on the security monitor. I watched it change. The polite interest collapsed. Her hand went to her chest. Her lips parted. No sound came out. She stared at the photograph, then read the name beneath it, then looked at the photograph again. She grabbed my father's arm. Dad looked at the portfolio, read the name, read it again. His face went gray. The same gray it had gone when he got the call about Maggie's stroke, the gray of a man watching certainty crumble. "Nora?" I heard him say through the security mic. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Nora Reeves? That's our Nora," Mom finished. "That's our Nora." Marcus, bless him, kept his composure. "Is everything all right, Mr. Ellison?" Dad looked at him, looked at the building around him. The marble, the skylights, the piano, the garden visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. This place, this extraordinary, beautiful, impossible place. "This is our daughter's?" Dad's voice cracked. "Our daughter built this?" Marcus paused. He'd been instructed not to discuss my personal history, but he'd also been instructed to answer questions honestly. Ms. Reeves founded Haven Senior Living 6 years ago, he said carefully. She designed this facility personally. She oversees all 4 of our communities. 4? Mom's voice was faint. There are 4? 4 communities, 340 residents, 200 staff members. Marcus handed them a brochure. We were recently profiled in Boston Magazine. The article is included in your portfolio. Mom opened the brochure. The Boston Magazine cover. My face. The headline, "The Woman Reinventing How We Age." My mother sat down on the nearest chair. Not gracefully. She simply folded like someone had removed her spine. Dad stood rigid, staring at the founder's letter. I knew what it said. I'd written it myself. Haven was born from a promise I made to someone who deserved better. My grandmother spent her final months in a facility that treated her like a burden. She asked me to build something different, a place where people are seen, valued, and honored. That promise became this community. Every detail at Haven exists because someone I loved taught me that dignity doesn't have an expiration date. Dad's hand was trembling. He set the portfolio down on the table. I need to sit down, he said. Marcus pulled out a chair. My parents sat in the welcome lounge of a building I'd built with money they didn't know I had, a business they didn't know existed, and a talent they'd never bothered to look for. And for the first time in 30 years, the backup plan was the only plan that had actually worked. Marcus called me 20 minutes after my parents left the building. They sat in the lounge for almost 40 minutes, he said. Your mother cried. Your father didn't say a word, just stared at the portfolio. Did they ask to see me? Your mother asked if you were available. I told her you were at another location. She asked for your number. A pause. I told her the number listed in the portfolio was for the corporate office. Thank you, Marcus. Nora. His voice softened. Your father asked me one question before he left. He asked how long you'd been doing this. I told him 6 years. He just stood there shaking his head and said, 6 years. She built all of this in 6 years and I had no idea. I sat with that for a while after we hung up. 6 years. 4 communities. 340 lives touched. $12 million in revenue, a staff of people I'd hired, trained, mentored, a brand that was reshaping how an entire industry thought about aging. And my father's first reaction wasn't pride, it was shock that I'd done it at all. Because in Frank Ellison's world, backup plans don't build empires. They answer phones and pick up groceries and drive you to the doctor. They serve a function. They don't create. The calls started the next morning, Mom first, 7:14 a.m. Nora, it's your mother. We need to talk. Please call me back. I had no idea. We didn't know. Please just call me. Then Dad. 8:30 a.m. His message was shorter, stiffer. Nora, it's your father. Call me when you get a chance. Then Mom again. 11 a.m. And her voice now carried that specific frequency of panic I'd heard only a few times in my life, the tone she used when something threatened the family's carefully maintained image. Nora, I don't understand why you didn't tell us. We would have been so supportive. We've always supported you. Please, sweetheart, let's have dinner. Let's talk about this. We've always supported you. That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know. They weren't processing what they'd done. They were already rewriting the story. I didn't call back. Not because I was punishing them, because I needed time to think about what I wanted this conversation to be. Daniel found me that evening on the porch of our house in Marblehead. I was sitting in the Adirondack chair Maggie used to sit in when she visited, staring at the harbor, so holding a cup of tea that had gone cold. They called? He asked. 7 times today, both of them. Are you going to call back? Eventually, when I know what I want to say. He sat beside me, quiet, the way he does. You know, I said, I always imagined this moment differently. In my head, it was dramatic. I'd walk into their living room with my portfolio and a PowerPoint and just lay it all out, watch their faces, finally make them see me. And now? Now I just feel tired. I looked at the harbor. I spent 30 years wanting their approval, and now I have something worth 4 communities and a Boston magazine cover, and the person I most want to show it to is buried in a cemetery in Quincy. Daniel reached over and took my hand. Then show Maggie, he said. Go visit her. Tell her what happened. And when you're ready, go talk to your parents. Not for them, for you. I went to Maggie's grave the next morning. Saturday. Autumn in Massachusetts. The maples blazing red and gold, the air sharp and clean. Her headstone was simple. She'd insisted on that. Margaret Rose Ellison, 1941 to 2022. She built things. I sat on the grass beside her and told her everything. The tour, the lobby, the look on Dad's face, the way Mom's hand went to her chest. You were right, Maggie, I said to the stone. They came looking, and I was standing behind a desk with my name on it. A cardinal landed on the headstone, stayed for a moment, flew away. I drove home, picked up the phone, and called my mother. We can talk, I said. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Haven Hingham, the conference room on the 2nd floor. A shaky breath. Oh, Nora, thank you. We'll be there. Oh, should I tell Blake? The question surprised me. What does Blake have to do with this? He's your brother. He should be part of... This conversation is between me and you and Dad. Blake can have his own conversation when I'm ready. Okay, of course. I hung up and called Marcus. I'll need the Seaside conference room tomorrow at 2. My parents are coming. I'll handle everything. Just make sure there's water on the table. Anything else? Yes. Hang the Boston magazine article in the hallway outside the room, framed. It's already there, Nora. Has been for months. I smiled. Good. 2 p.m. Sunday, Haven Hingham. I arrived early, walked the hallways the way I do every time I visit, checking details, noting things to fix, saying hello to residents. Mrs. Kowalski was in the art studio painting peonies. Mr. Tanaka was in the library arguing with Mr. Goldstein about whether Hemingway was overrated. In the dining room, Chef Amara was prepping for the evening meal, and the whole floor smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. This was mine. Not because I owned it on paper, though I did, but because I had built it from nothing, from a dying woman's promise and a 7-year-old girl's pain. Every hallway, every grab bar, every freshly cut flower in every vase was proof that the backup plan had become the architect. I sat in the conference room and waited. The harbor was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. On the wall, the Boston magazine article, framed, my face, my name. On the table, a carafe of water, 3 glasses, and Maggie's handwritten note in a simple frame. I'd brought it from home. I wanted her in the room. The door opened at 2:04 p.m. Mom came in first. She'd dressed up, the good blouse, the pearl earrings, like she was going to church, or to an event where she needed to perform respectability. Dad followed, blue blazer again. He looked older than last time I'd seen him, grayer, smaller. The retired accountant who'd spent his whole life feeling like he was in charge, now walking into a building owned by the daughter he'd never invested in. They both stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around the conference room. The table, the windows, the framed article, the view. Sit down, I said. Professional. Warm but boundaried. They sat across from me. Mom's hands were in her lap, fidgeting with her rings. Dad's were on the table, clasped. Thank you for seeing us, Mom started. Nora, I want you to know... Let me go first. My voice was calm. I'd rehearsed this, not the words, the tone, the cadence, the steady, measured delivery of someone who's had 30 years to prepare. I have some things I need to say, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? Mom nodded. Dad's jaw tightened, his reflexive response to anyone else controlling the conversation. But he nodded too. Good. I took a breath, looked at Maggie's note in its frame, drew strength from it. When I was 7 years old, you told me I was the backup plan. You said it at the dinner table the night you announced Blake was going to Weston Academy. Mom, you said every family needs one. Dad, you said it like it was my job title. Mom's face crumpled. Dad didn't move. I was 7. I didn't know that wasn't normal. I didn't know other families didn't assign roles like that, the investment and the insurance policy. I just thought that was what I was, the reliable one, the one who'd be there when you needed her. I kept my voice level, no trembling, no tears, not yet. You spent approximately $340,000 on Blake's education. Weston, Exeter, Cornell, Wharton. I know because I found the spreadsheet. You labeled it Blake's investment portfolio. There was no spreadsheet for me. Dad's hands tightened on each other. I went to public school. I got a full scholarship to UMass. And when I told you, Dad, your first response was, "Good. That saves us money for Blake's business school." My full ride to college was valuable to you only as a line item on Blake's budget. Nora? Dad started. I asked you not to interrupt. He closed his mouth. I won first place at the state history fair. You were at Blake's lacrosse game. I asked to join Science Olympiad. Entry fee $35. And you said you couldn't afford it because of Blake's season. Mrs. Delgado drove me to the fair. Mrs. Delgado, a public school teacher, drove me to the most important academic event of my childhood because my own parents were watching a lacrosse game. Mom pressed her hand to her mouth. My trophy ended up in the junk drawer. Blake's trophies had a shelf in the living room. I know that seems like a small thing. It's not. It's the architecture of how you built our family. Blake was the showpiece. I was the utility closet. Silence. The harbor glittered outside the window. Somewhere down the hall, Arthur was playing the piano. Something soft. Debussy, maybe. When Grandma Maggie had her stroke, she listed me as her emergency contact. Not you, Dad, me. I visited her every single day for 2 months. You came once. Blake sent a card he didn't sign. Dad looked at the table. Maggie died in a rehabilitation center with a 2.3-star Google rating and a broken call button by her bed. She asked me, begged me, not to let her end up in a place like that, and I couldn't save her in time. My voice wavered for the first time, just slightly. But I could build something better, so I did. I gestured to the room around us, the harbor, the building, everything. This is Haven, 4 communities, 340 residents, 200 employees, $12 million in annual revenue. Profiled in Boston Magazine, consulted by the governor's office, and rated the #1 senior living provider in Massachusetts for 3 consecutive years. I let that land. I built this with Maggie's money she left me, specifically me, because I was the only person in this family who treated her like a human being. I built this with mentors who believed in me when you didn't. I built this with a husband who married me knowing I was nobody's first choice except his. Mom was crying now, silently, tears running down her cheeks, dripping off her chin. And I built this, I said, my voice dropping, under my married name. Because I didn't want you to know, not out of spite, because your knowledge didn't matter, your approval didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I was building for myself. And it turns out that's the only foundation that holds. I reached for the framed note and turned it toward them. This is from Maggie. She gave it to me with the money. Dad leaned forward, read it aloud, his voice barely audible. Nora. You were never the backup plan. You were always the foundation. Build on it. He stopped, pressed his fist against his mouth. A sound came out of him, not a word. Something between a groan and a gasp. The sound of a man meeting the full weight of a 30-year mistake. Mom reached for my hand across the table. I let her take it. Not because I needed the comfort, because she did, and I'd spent my whole life being the one who gave. We didn't know, she whispered. Nora, we didn't know. You didn't ask. The words hung there, simple, devastating, true. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every family dinner, you asked what Blake was doing. You talked about Blake's job, Blake's apartment, Blake's fund. Not once in 30 years did you ask me what I was building. Not once did you look across that table and think, I wonder what Nora's working on. I pulled my hand back gently. You didn't not know because I hid it. You didn't know because you never looked. Dad spoke for the first time in several minutes. His voice was wrecked. "We made a terrible mistake. You made a choice. Every year for 30 years you chose Blake. You chose to invest in him, celebrate him, center him, and you chose to use me, to assume I'd be available whenever you needed domestic help, childcare, emotional labor, backup." I leaned back in my chair. I'm not angry anymore. I was, for a long time, but anger is expensive. And I had a business to run. The faintest flicker of a smile. Dad didn't return it. What I am is clear. Clear about what happened, clear about what I need going forward, and clear about what I'm willing to offer. Mom looked up, desperate hope in her eyes. "We want to make this right. Whatever it takes." "Then here's what it takes." I pulled a folder from beside my chair, opened it. First, family counseling. Both of you. Not for me, for yourselves. You need to understand why you divided your children into investments and insurance policies and how that choice shaped everything that followed. Dad's instinct flared. "We don't need..." "You're sitting in a building your daughter built without your knowledge, funded by money your mother left specifically to the child you neglected. You need counseling." He went quiet. Second, Blake. I'll talk to him separately, on my timeline, not his and not yours. Don't arrange it, don't push it, don't tell him what to say. Mom nodded. Third, if you want a relationship with me, a real one, it starts from zero, not from where we left off. From zero. That means you earn my trust the way any stranger would, with time, consistency, and respect for boundaries I set. I closed the folder. And fourth. I paused. Haven Hingham has a 2-year waiting list. I know you were interested in residency. Both of them looked up. If and when you're ready, I'll make sure you're considered. But not as a favor, and not as a transaction. You'd go through the same application process as every other resident. You'd meet the same standards. And you'd live in this community knowing that the woman who built it, the woman whose name is on every wall and every welcome letter, is the daughter you called the backup plan. I let that settle. That's not revenge, that's just reality. And reality, it turns out, has a sense of irony that I could never have planned. The room was quiet. The piano had stopped. Through the window, a sailboat crossed the harbor, white against blue. Mom stood up. She walked around the table. I could see her coming, arms already lifting, the way mothers do when words have failed and all that's left is the body's vocabulary. "May I?" she asked. She actually asked. That was new. "Yes." She hugged me, tight. Not a performance. Not the quick obligatory embrace of holidays past. A real hug, the kind that shakes with everything it's carrying. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Nora. Not just for the tour, for all of it. For every science fair I missed, for every time I looked past you to get to Blake, for every time I called you reliable like that was enough." She pulled back. Her face was swollen, mascara gone. She looked like a woman meeting her daughter for the first time. "You're not reliable, Nora. You're extraordinary, and I should have said that 30 years ago." Dad stood. Slower. He was a man for whom emotional expression was a foreign language, and he was trying to speak it without a dictionary. He walked to the window, looked out at the harbor, the grounds, the garden where 2 residents were walking together in the autumn sun. "How did we miss this?" His voice was hoarse. "Yeah, how did I miss my own daughter?" "Because you weren't looking." He turned. His eyes were red. Frank Ellison, the man who had never once told me he was proud, never once attended my events, never once looked at me the way he looked at Blake, was crying. "Your grandmother was right," he said. "She was always right about you. She was right about a lot of things. She told me once." He stopped, swallowed hard. "She told me I was making a mistake. With you. She said I was going to regret it." He pressed his hand to his forehead. "I told her to mind her own business." "I know, she told me." "Nora." He crossed the room, stood in front of me. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me. Not through me, not past me, not at the space where I should have been. At me. I don't have the right to say I'm proud of you. I haven't earned that, but I need you to hear this. He put his hands on my shoulders. They were trembling. You are the best thing I ever had a hand in creating, and I spent 30 years treating you like you were nothing. That's on me. That will always be on me, and I will spend whatever time I have left trying to deserve the chance to know the person you became. I looked at my father. 63 years old. Gray. Diminished. Standing in a building he couldn't have imagined, built by a daughter he never imagined could build it. That's a start, Dad. Not forgiveness, not absolution. A start, an opening, a door I was choosing to leave unlocked. He nodded. The small, devastated nod of a man who understood that a start was more than he deserved. I met Blake 2 weeks later. His choice of venue, a diner in Quincy. His choice of time, a Saturday morning when I suspect he figured I'd be off duty. He looked rough, thinner than I remembered. The groomed confidence of his Wall Street years had been replaced by something unfinished. Stubble, circles under his eyes, a jacket that needed pressing. He slid into the booth across from me without making eye contact. Mom told me about Haven, he said to the table. About what you built. Yes. I had no idea. Nobody did. He finally looked up. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have cared? The question landed hard. He flinched. Blake, when you came into the kitchen at Christmas, the one where I cooked the entire meal and you said I was good at the domestic stuff, did you wonder, even for a second, what I did when I wasn't cooking for our family? He trailed off. No, I didn't. Right. Because in our family, you were the story. I was the person who cleaned up after the story was told. He rubbed his face with both hands. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, I said. You didn't choose to be the golden child any more than I chose to be the backup plan. Mom and Dad built those roles, but you benefited from them, Blake. You benefited from every dollar they spent on you and every dollar they didn't spend on me. I know. And when your fund collapsed and you needed $20,000, who did Mom call? You. Not because she thought I had the money, because she thought I'd find a way. Because that's what the backup plan does. She finds a way, absorbs the cost, asks nothing in return. Blake stared at his coffee. It was getting cold. He hadn't taken a sip. I'm sorry, Nora. His voice was quiet, stripped. Nothing performative about it. I took everything they gave me and never once asked why you weren't getting the same. That makes me complicit. Yes, it does. What can I do? Get help. Figure out who you are when you're not the investment. That's your work, not mine. He nodded. And Blake? One more thing. He looked up. The next time you see Grandma Maggie's grave, leave flowers. She deserved better from all of us, but especially from you. He had the decency to look ashamed. I left the diner, drove to Haven Marblehead, walked through the lobby, past the reception desk, past Arthur at the piano, Chopin today, past the library where Mrs. Kowalski was teaching a painting class to 3 new residents. I climbed the stairs to my office, sat at my desk, looked at the harbor. On the wall behind me, Maggie's note, framed. The Boston Magazine cover, framed. My UMass diploma, framed. The blue ribbon from the State History Fair. I'd found it in my old room during a visit years ago, still in the junk drawer. It had a shelf now. All of it had a shelf now. Sunday morning, 3 months later, February. Light snow falling, the kind that doesn't stick but makes everything look like it's being gently forgiven. I'm in the kitchen of our Marblehead house. Daniel is making eggs. Our dog, a rescue mutt named Blueprint, don't ask, Daniel named her, is stationed under the table hoping for scraps. The doorbell rings. I open the door, Mom and Dad on the porch. Dad is holding a bag of bagels from the place on Hanover Street. Mom has a plant, an orchid, my favorite, something she'd apparently learned from Aunt Teresa. Hi, sweetheart, Mom says, tentative, hopeful. Come in, coffee's almost ready. They step inside. Dad looks around. This is the 4th time they've visited. Each time he catalogs the house like he's trying to memorize it, the bookshelves, the art, the framed photos of Haven's opening day. He stops at a photo on the mantel. Maggie and me at my college graduation. The only family member who came. He picks it up, holds it for a long moment, sets it back down with the careful precision of a man handling something he knows he doesn't deserve to touch. "Can I help with anything?" he asks. Same question he's asked every visit, same answer every time. "You can set the table, Dad." He nods, goes to the cabinet. He knows which one now, takes out plates, counts them. "4?" I say. "4," he repeats, sets them down, carefully. Daniel hands him a cup of coffee. Mom stands by the window watching the snow. Blueprint nudges Dad's hand for a piece of bagel. He gives her one, looks around to see if I noticed. I did. It's awkward. It's imperfect. The silence is still there, years of it, packed dense as sedimentary rock between us. We can't drill through it in a morning, maybe not in a year. But there are 4 plates on the table, and that's more than there were before. My parents started counseling in March. Dr. Rivera, a family therapist in Brookline, Dad hates it, goes anyway. Mom cries every session, calls me afterward and says, "I'm learning things about myself I wish I'd learned 30 years ago." Blake is in therapy too, individual. He got a job, not Wall Street, not venture capital. Project management at a construction firm, modest, real. He seems lighter. We text sometimes, short messages. No performances. He visited Haven last month. I gave him the tour myself. When we got to the Maggie Ellison Memorial Garden, yes, I named the garden after her, he stood there for a long time. "She would have loved this," he said. "She would have loved being here. I should have visited her more." Yes. He didn't argue, didn't deflect. That was new. Haven's 5th location breaks ground this spring. Gloucester, North Shore, harbor views, 80 suites, our biggest yet. Helen called me yesterday to go over the financing. "You've built something remarkable, Nora," she said. Same words she's been saying for 6 years. They never get old. "Maggie built it," I said. "I just followed the blueprint." "No." Helen's voice was firm. "Maggie gave you permission. You built the building." I thought about that after we hung up. She was right. The money was a tool. The vision was mine. The early mornings, the late nights, the zoning hearings, the licensing battles, the staff training, the 3 a.m. calls from worried families, all of that was mine. Maggie gave me the seed. I grew the forest. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you've been the backup plan, the reliable one, the one everyone counts on but no one counts, I want to tell you something. Your worth was never determined by the role they assigned you. The backup plan, the golden child, the scapegoat, the fixer. Those are their categories, not yours. You get to define yourself. I spent 30 years in a box labeled reliable. It took a dying grandmother, a $740,000 inheritance, and 6 years of silent building to step out of it. But here's the thing. I didn't need the money to be extraordinary. I was extraordinary at 7, standing in that kitchen with a first-place trophy nobody looked at. The money just gave me the tools to prove it on a scale they couldn't ignore. You don't need a secret inheritance. You don't need a dramatic reveal. You just need to stop waiting for the people who overlooked you to finally turn around. Build your own table, set your own plates, and when they come knocking, and they will, let them in on your terms. Not because you owe them, but because you've built something big enough to include people who are willing to change. That's not revenge. That's architecture. And architecture, when it's built right, doesn't just shelter the builder. It shelters everyone who walks through the door. My name is Nora Reeves. I'm 32 years old. I was the backup plan for 3 decades. Now I'm the blueprint. 4 plates on my table this Sunday, and next Sunday, and the one after that. It's not perfect. It's not the childhood I deserved, but it's real, and real, as it turns out, is the only thing worth building. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family, your own role, your own unbuilt building, leave me a comment. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have let them tour that building? Would you have opened the door? Thank you for being here until the very end. You matter more than the role they gave you. I promise. I'll see you next time.